Welcome back. When we left off, we were actually trying to make use of this polymorphism with our little school project here. We had made a class called Test School, and Test School had an array list of type person, and we're just showing you how this could accept any of the subclasses, right? Because all those objects can technically morph into the person type. Now, we're going to look at two of the methods that weren't discussed in here. And these two were pick random individual and get return date of first exchange student. So let's take a look at pick random individual first and how this has to work. Now keep in mind what I want to do here is just randomly pick one of the people in the roster. You've done this before with array list of strings or array list of numbers. Now we're going to do it with the array list of person. So here's your standard. Pick a random number that is in a good range for your array list and get that person out of the roster. Now a big key point here is notice the type. We've gone over this before, but this is important. The roster was type person, so declared up here. And so that's what you can take out. Okay, you can take out the person. Whoops, where were we? Right there. So I take out type person. Keeping in mind this could be a student or an exchange student, a person or a teacher, right? They're all going to work, and then I return person, and that's what that method does, returns a person. Now, what can the person do with that, or I should say, what can the programmer do with that person that comes back? Well, they can do anything that you can do with a person. So let's actually use this one here. Pick random individual, and let's give it a go and see if it works. So I'm going to go to my runner, and I've added a person, and let's go for it. Let's say, hey, person, someone, hey, school. Pick a random individual. And basically, it's going to go back, and it sends back a person object, right? Pretty good. Now, what happens if it's a student? Could I have said student? No, because what's coming back is a person, but I'm expecting now someone to qualify as a student. This wouldn't work, right? A person, which is this, is not a student. And so we have to sort of make sure our types match when you do this work. We'll do another example that sort of builds on this afterwards. Now what could I do with that person? Well, I could say someone dot study. Nope, can't do that. Okay, persons don't have the study method, right? When you look at the list in there, right? Study belongs to student. So really all you can do is you can do the stuff here, right? So I could say breathe or talk or stuff, and that would work fine. So I could just say, you know, do stuff or whatever you're going to do with that person object is totally fine. Now, to take a look at the second method, whoa, there's my test school. The second method was get return date of first exchange student. Of course, students always ask, how do you tell what you've grabbed if you have a random mix of objects in a list? Well, one thing you can do is you can use this method called instance of, and there's a pretty decent example of it right here. So I want to go through the roster. I pick out the people, just like I did before. And then if they're an exchange student, they're going to be the first exchange student, I can print out their return date. Here's an example of using a whole mix of the stuff. So I access my list, I pull out a person. I can check, is temp an instance of exchange student? This is a built-in command in Java. Okay, it's not something I coded, but it'll basically return you true or false. It tells you whether or not it's an instance of that type. And let's say it is, I'll grab the date out. Now, a little problem you've seen before earlier where we used casting to solve our issue. I think it might have been here. We did a little casting in a previous video. Is what we're pulling out is a person. And so if I just said temp, get return date, that doesn't work. You can see right here I could go string D equals temp, get return date. And you'll get the underline. get return date. Hey, I'm temp. I'm a person. Persons don't have a method called get return date. It has to be an exchange student that does this. Now, we've already checked, so we know that this is an exchange student. We've just guaranteed it right here. So what you do is you know you're going to be able to safely cast it. So you're going to take that person and cast them as an exchange student. It goes to memory, it tries to cast, it will be successful because we know it's an exchange student, and exchange students can use the get return date method. So these are some little, I don't know if you call it a nuisance, but it's just what you have to do to have that flexibility of being able to add several types into the list. And then we print out the date and we get out of there. If we make it through the whole for loop and we never do this code here, then I never found an exchange student. I can just print out no exchange student found. When I actually do this in the runner here, I can just do a little TS. Whoops, that didn't work. TS dot get return date of first exchange student. Give it a quick run, and it just confirms. Nice. I mean, they all have the same date right now, but you know, it would work. Right? Reprints out the date. Not too bad. Let's wrap this one up by adding one little extra method here. Instead of finding the first exchange student, let me make a method that returns the first exchange student and just show you what you can do with it here in the runner program. So this should be very similar to get return date of first exchange student. I'm just going to do a bunch of copy pasting here and I'll fast forward for you. But I'm going to write public student. Let's do this. Public exchange student get first exchange student. So this method is actually going to return the first exchange student. Now here's the fast forward for you. And here's my code, and yeah, we have a red line, but we're going to fix that up. So let's check out how the method looks here. But here's the basics. I'm going to return an exchange student, and it's get first exchange student. I go through the roster. If temp is an instance of exchange student, return temp. But here's the problem. Incompatible types. It found a person. Remember, temp is a person. I'm trying to return specifically an exchange student. And so let's change this here. And let's return the cast of it. So exchange student temp. Yes, you can do this kind of stuff. So now it's actually returning an object of type exchange student that matches the signature of the method. And then when you go back, I should just make one little note here. Notice if I don't find anything, I return null. Null will be no memory address to any student found, indicating I didn't find any. Now in my runner, I can do something like this. Exchange student. Exchange student pick equals TS dot. Where is it? Get first exchange student. And then I can maybe system out print line. Oh, I don't want to do that. It could be null. If the pick is not null, system out print line pick dot name. Else system out print line no exchange student found. I know it gets so tricky now, right? Memory addresses and types, you sort of got to take care of all the situations. But this here, you'll see it works. And when I give it a little run, it should be no problem. And Rico was the first one. And if you go back and look, he is the first exchange student in the list. And so all this stuff with types. Could I change this to student? And the answer is it worked. Notice here, An exchange student is a student. So it qualifies, right? You can actually put it on the right-hand side of that equal sign. As long as pick points in memory to something that qualifies as a student. And an exchange student is a student. Now, the only downside here is I'm just going pick.name. A student has access to the name variable. But if I try to do something fancy like pick dot, notice I can't do get return date home. That doesn't belong to the student class, right? So these are more the rules of what you can and can't do at this point. But hopefully you're sort of getting the hang of it, that it's just all about types, the is a rule, and all about what extends what and what you're allowed to do. Anyways, that's a little more use on the polymorphism. There's a lot more examples to go through, but for this course, that's a solid basis for the AP exam of what you could see in their code, and then they ask you to write methods or ask you to read code. Thanks for watching, and go and practice some of the practice questions.